joining the One Ohio Recovery Foundation Board of Directors June of 2025 meeting. And I want to thank the County Commissioners Association of Ohio for this fine venue. It's actually one of my favorite meeting spots, especially in Columbus. I would like to ask Lori to do, it's the company is what she said. I would like to ask Lori to do the roll call, please.
Director Bruce.
Here.
Director Amen.
Here.
Director Whiston.
Here.
Director Hendry.
Yes.
Director Ayers.
Here.
Director Mason.
Here.
Director Mayer.
Here.
Director Powell.
Here.
Director St. John.
Here.
Director Worsbicky.
Here.
Director Dodge.
Here.
Director Driehaus.
Here.
Director Hopago.
Yes. Here.
Director Tyler Lee. Director Mattia.
Virtually present.
Director Piccarilli.
Here.
Director Greta Johnson. Director Silac. Director Gregoire.
Here.
Director Kidd.
Here.
Director Lee.
Here.
Director White.
Here.
Director Radcliffe.
Here.
Director Roizen.
Here.
Director Baker. Director Claymeyer.
Here.
Director Terry Johnson. Director Rob Blaisdell.
Here.
Wonderful. We have a quorum. Thank you very much to all. I'd like to also welcome our guests and thank those of you who are joining us. Again, we can hear your comments, your feedback, but if you send us an email during the meeting to info@oneohiofoundation.com, we'll try to take a look at it during the meeting. Now, before we get started with our agenda, I want to remind those of you who have terms expiring this year, we will need your reappointment documentation from your appointing authority as soon as possible. If you're not sure, if you're one of those, just reach out to Lori, Alicia, or to me, and I will try to find the answer. We'll try to find the answer. Also, I'd like to thank so many of you who attended a statewide mental health and addiction conference that was in town this week. The foundation is proud to partner with the Ohio Association of Behavioral Health Authorities, the association that supports the Adam H. boards. They bring critical training and information to the behavioral health field. And as you know, we had people in attendance and they were happy to connect with around 86 of our grantees from across the state. During the event, our grantees were able to network with one another, share information about their grant-funded programs and projects, and they gave us feedback on the process. And they were also able to connect with the board and some of the expert panel members. Again, thank you to all those who were able to make that attendance. I also would like to emphasize some new funding opportunities for our communities now. First is the Ohio Attorney General's Office. David Yost, as you know, the state receives 15% of the opiate settlement funds that come to Ohio. The Ohio Attorney General, David Yost, and his team have put those dollars to tremendous use and grant opportunities in Ohio's jails. The focus of this opportunity is to improve outcomes for individuals and substance abuse disorders, with substance abuse disorders in our jails by up to $200,000 per calendar year for services, and additional $50,000 can be made available for medication and supplies for inmates as well. Please make sure your local law enforcement agencies are aware of this opportunity. Next, at the national level, I want to make sure that we're all aware of the FORE Foundation, F-O-R-E, which stands for Foundation for Opiate Response Efforts. The FORE Foundation is similar to One Ohio, that they have been charged with distribution of the funds at a national level using proceeds from the opiate settlements.
How big is the FORE Foundation? process.
Thank you, Michael. Do you have the total? I just know they're giving grants up to $150,000 for community-based organizations. And they have to be 501c3 organizations. But you know the total amount in there.
I believe the total offered is going to be 7 million, but I'd have to double check that.
So I know that many of us get questions about funding opportunities and when the next funding opportunities will be available. So we will continue to share these as they arise. We make sure to share with our communities and bring these dollars to Ohio or utilize what is made available to the state. So moving on with the agenda. Again, I was happy to get those announcements out of the way. Our first order of business, though, is to approve the agenda as distributed. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion by our newest father in the room. I think you still are. And is there a second?
Second,
Was that Michael?
yes.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion for the agenda? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, and the motion carries. So the next meeting, our next item is we had the minutes in our packet for the April board meeting and the May strategic planning session. And we will be covering some of the strategic planning session later on today also. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
So moved. Where's Vicky?
Jeanette makes the motion.
Second, Jim White.
Thank you. And we have our second by Jim White. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and the motion carries. So I'd like to get into our long and short-term financial planning discussion this time. It's the next item on our agenda, and I'll turn the floor over to Alicia and the financial team to discuss with us. Again, it's our short and long-term spending plans with the goal today of coming to a consensus of what our path forward will be for the foundation.
Exciting day, and I'm looking forward to the conversations. I just wanted to give an update of where we've been to kind of get to this point. And so, as you all may remember, we, for the last couple of months, have had several meetings, all leading to this day, the June board meeting, really to vote on the next steps. And we want to make sure we're voting on long-term and short-term spending today. With that being said, you know, from our conversations, we had some key discussion questions. I'll just quickly go through this because I want to get to those financials. Just to say that, you know, we will continue to have these conversations about the 7 questions that you all found to be most important to deal with. But highest priority of those 7 questions was the spending horizon and the funding. And how are we going to spend the funds that have been entrusted to us? And so we are looking forward to having those discussions as a part of kind of you know, if we're playing air traffic control, there's a lot of planes in the air right now when it comes to the work of the foundation. We will continue our staff action plan and keeping the lights on and all the things that we need to do to be a good nonprofit. We're continuing that grant compliance work. We'll continue to talk more about and hopefully have that vote we need to start the next grant cycle. And then, like we said, that strategic and regional planning work with those other 6 questions that we need to talk through will continue through our conversations today and in future meetings. So I didn't want you to walk away and not know, you know, some of the answers to some of those other questions, but we're starting with that highest priority today. And so with that, I will turn it over to David to talk us through what we talked about at the strategic planning session, and then we'll take a few important votes today.
Sounds good, and thanks again for having us here. Is it okay to do it from here? Okay, great. All right, so for those that were with us in person, the first few slides are just going to be a recap of our portion of the strategy session together. And so the 3 objectives from the finance perspective were A, let's make sure that we're educated on the types of options that we had for our investments. Let's understand what the trade-offs are to those so that we can ultimately help get a better understanding about what will best serve the mission of One Ohio going forward. With those 3 objectives in mind, we just wanted to put the challenge out there, that what are we really solving for here when we're talking about what was the most important question to all of you, which is ultimately that there are differing views, sometimes competing views on the way in which we should utilize our assets. And so there's some differences there on how we deploy them, and that lack of clarity, regardless of the answer, right? No judgment on any of the answers, means that we underutilize our assets, because without that clarity and a path forward, we're not able to maximize the resources that we have. And so working towards that clarity, we said we can put some scenarios together to help folks see the options. They're not exclusive. And I think this was a point made really well when we were together, which is, well, David, you made me choose one, but I would have loved to have had elements of this and elements of that. And we did that on purpose to get people to say direction, focus, where are we going? And we need to then be able to get that guidance from the board to come back with a much tighter, narrow scope for us to be able to come back with realistic options for everyone. And I know this is too small on the screen, so I'll just say in a few words that we had 3 scenarios. The first was cash in, cash out. As money comes in, we're going to spend it pretty quickly. So by the end of 18 years, when the MOU funds are complete, this portion of our work will be done. The point was made that doesn't mean that an organization sunsets. It means that this portion of the work would be done. The second was, and at the end of that term, you'd have $0 for this portion. The second concept is what's a term endowment or a spend down model, where you say we want to extend that time frame so that we can be more predictable and spend and make a longer term impact, but still balance our near term needs and our longer term ability by investing predictably, so that hopefully we can distribute even more over that longer period of time. And still at the end say we're making a commitment to deploy these dollars for our communities. And which means, again, at the end of whatever period is chosen, that again, you would be at the same juncture as the idea of cash management, but it'd be a longer period and you change your investments. The third was a perpetual endowment. Could we allow this to grow forever and create an ongoing stream of support for the mission in perpetuity? Those were the 3 scenarios that were explored. And so we asked folks to go around the room to explore them, to look at pros and cons and look through a few different lenses. And as any, good or bad consultant uses lots of Post-it notes, and stickers and check marks and all the things, fine. So what ultimately happened at the end of the day was people understood what we were trying to solve for. And so let's be clear about what ultimately this was solving for. The grant making and operating resources. We need predictability for operations and we need predictability for the regions. The assets, what do we want to have at the end of the day from a financial standpoint? Investments and risks. Are we able to stomach some of the risks that come with different choices that we might make? And then I need to make sure that we're saying this out loud, is that these are directional. The actual specifics need the guidance of the board, which an investment advisor would then help us with the construction of a portfolio and all those downstream impacts. But you don't do that without some of the direction that we would hope to get here. And maybe more important than any number or any choice was the learnings that I think came out of that meeting. And really 4 pieces that, and frankly, as a facilitator, and I guess also as, from CFO and facilitator hat in that room, things that I didn't fully appreciate was the fact just the sense of urgency among everyone in the room to save lives now. That we're talking about dollars, but we're actually talking about lives at the end of the day. We cannot lose sight of what's most important, which is the lives that we're saving. And in order to save even more lives, we might be able to do something that could maximize those dollars for the future, for today and the future. So there's the balance, there's the tension between what we could do today and what we could do over time. In order to be effective, we need predictability. Predictability from an operations standpoint. The regions need predictability so that we can start thinking about the longevity and the way in which dollars will be deployed into our regions. And then there was a recognition at the end of the session where someone raised their hand and said, look, I don't know of another organization or model that long-term has this model and focus that would go beyond the cash in, cash out model, that actually says we are thinking longer term, and that would allow us to leverage better dollars, even outside of these initial sources of funds, to leverage and become even more impactful. And so the courage to take some of those steps forward was a factor that came into play during the conversation. And so there were lots more comments and lots more things, but these 4 key elements I think were really important. And then we asked everybody to stand at one of the 3. What's the best fit for the model that we were talking about? And ultimately, folks chose the second. And I'm going to go through the pieces on the screen because for those in the room, it's going to be hard to read. But that the idea of a term endowment would say, be predictable, invest in our future, but understand that there should be an end date on this so that we're deploying our resources. In doing so, we can maximize those dollars going out into the community. But I also think it's important just to take a minute, if it's okay with everybody to continue on this slide, just to know what that really means. Right, yeah, at the end, that's a concept, but what does it really mean in practice? And the first is, well, we're getting dollars over the next 15 to 18 years in total. You would want to extend that time frame at least by some, right? To call it 25 years usually or more. But we're not bound by time. We can choose time. We have to learn about what that would mean to granting and other things. But the timeline would extend beyond the 18 years so that we can invest predictably. It creates more funds in total, but they're spread out over a longer period of time. The second factor is the investment choices. We would have to have a different balance than we do today in our investments, which are all managed and essentially in interest-bearing accounts and custodial accounts. While we've gotten a lot of interest, we could be getting a lot more. But we would need to change our risk profile to do that, right? Risk and return, classic, right? Think about your own personal lives, not that different. The investment performance, being able to get 4.5 or 5.5%, potentially net of fees, depending again how long you make this time frame, would mean that these assets, whatever we put in there, could grow by 3 to 6 times depending on the time frame and the returns. So you have potentially a larger pot to work with over that time. From a granting cycle perspective, I don't think it changes much about 1 year or 2 year. We can make those same decisions, but that it's about making sure that we have the available liquid resources to do what the board wants to do. And so the choice to think about how frequently and how much you grant has an impact on the way you invest. I think that's the basic trade-off there. We do need to call out, and Alicia alluded to it, earlier on, which is that the MOU funds, we have a schedule, so we have expectations, but we do not always have guarantees. And so we need to make sure that we're aware of the risk that some of those funds might not come in. We have a couple that are delayed right now that we're working on, and we are working to review the others to understand the risk profile. It's not all downside though. There's also other negotiations going on that might increase that number. So again, there's just an understanding that if the number changes, our strategy may also have to change. And then, the annual spending, I think there's a reminder in this room, especially with this conversation, that when you make choices today, the more spending you make today, the less there is to invest for this time frame. And so it will reduce, let's say you said 100 million, right? Like you wouldn't be able to effectively run that same strategy the same way over the same period of time, the more that you spend right now. Truly just, I hope it's being as objective as I can of just saying, what are the trade-offs and what are the choices here? And so I think it's important first to get educated to understand, because almost unanimously, the people that were in the room stood at this option and had this discussion. So I want to make sure that for those that were there, that you feel that my summary is accurate to the discussion that was had. So is there any adjustment to this summary for folks that were in the room?
Just 14 out of 16 stood at the choice number 2.
Correct. So 14 out of 16 stood at choice number 2, and the other 2 stood at the perpetual endowment model, and no one stood at the cash only model. So that was the basics for what we're talking about today. Any other questions? Because again, right, some of us have different levels of understanding of these concepts and the way these work. And the investment committee's been talking about this, and finance and audit's coming up. So I just want to make sure from a board perspective that we also had clarity before we have the discussion.
Yeah, just one comment. I mean, I was one of the 2 at the perpetual option, and I was surprised to find myself there. But
He was not coerced.
I think we all kind of agreed that the devil's in the details, and when picking a term, a definite term, we were going to see what the numbers would show as far as your aggressiveness towards investments. There's going to be a great difference in rate of return possibly between the perpetual and the limited option. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware that before we make a final decision, we need to really run the numbers. Thanks.
I think that makes perfect sense. And I would think about this in a 2-step process. One is to give direction. Yeah. And then the second is to, when we would need to come back with those investment modeling options to say, here's the options. And now within this framework, to then say, here's the trade-offs of option A versus option B, 25 versus 35, more aggressive investments, less aggressive investments. What does that mean for granting, annual versus biannual? You can make, like, there's different levers that you pull. And so then we would be able to come back and say, here's the range of options. Is there an acceptable option within here? But we need the direct, I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of spending. It's, work from our investment advisor, from us, from the team. And I think we need this direction, but it also influences choices that you'll make today, because you may choose to be more aggressive or conservative about your spending decision based on the framework that we're talking about here. So this helps get the framework in place. And then there's going to be spending decisions today. So let's make sure that we're just aligned on the direction and the trajectory, knowing that, to Dave's points, we need to then come back with the targeted range of numbers with this direction in mind. Any other questions or even comments from those that were in the room? Anything that you would add color to here? All right, I'll make one final comment here, which is I think that many people who, Dave said it himself, but that many people found themselves surprised where they ended up standing. And that, I think, was its own when they went through this exercise. It's always what a good set of open-minded people means, is that when you surprise yourself, there's like learning, there's insights, there's movement, and I think it was really positive from that perspective. So I think there was alignment around what it means. Now we got to get some numbers on the table. So I think I've pretty much covered these, but let me do my final piece, and then I'll turn it over, which is really ultimately, why is it important to make this decision now about the framework? Not about the number, but about the framework, because we need time. Time is our best friend when it comes to investment. So we need to know what we're working with and what our timeframes are generally. The focus I've talked about, and the spending I think we've now talked about. I don't want to belabor the point. And I do want to make maybe I want to put a finer point on the funding streams element, which is that when you have a model like this and the predictability of a future, other folks tend to want to get involved and on board. And we've heard some of that behind the scenes, that there's excitement around this concept, not just internally, but externally, meaning there could be other dollars that get leveraged. And so be careful not to just put our blinders on just to these dollars, but to the fact that our choice could also expand the pie. Ultimately, and I think that's a big hope that this opens that door, right? Whereas some of the other models don't, and I think that's a powerful statement to make. So, unless there are other questions or comments, I will, I believe, turn it back, Alicia, to you or our esteemed chair.
Yeah, and what Alicia and I were trying to decide is what to do next, and it's getting the horses in front of the cart is what we're trying to do. And for the investment committee to function and to invest money in longer term and perhaps change the investment guidelines, which I do think is necessary. By the way, let's remember, when we adopted our guidelines, it was in June of 22, July of 22. You had banks failing, Silicon Bank, Signature Bank, Republic Bank. And we felt that the most important thing to do is make sure not a single dollar of our money was lost through one of those types of, I don't want to call it nefarious, but those kind of activities. So therefore, Jim Quinn was very good in making sure that everything we invested in was 100% secure. And at that point in time, was making 5%. So we felt good about that. But again, for the investment committee to plan out our money, we really have to know when our next funding cycle is, so we can sort of pull that sum of money out and allow them then to come up with the investment guidelines. So at that point in time, I would like to have a motion to address the next funding cycle and at what level. And then after that, we can address the investment.
Chair, I would like to make a motion that we discuss our next funding level, and I would like to suggest $50 million.
Okay. So there's a motion for 50 million in our next funding cycle. Is there a second to the motion?
Director Worsbicky, second.
I'll do both, Denise Dreyhouse and Jeanette. But thank you. So we have doing most. So the motion on the floor is to set aside 50 million for the next funding cycle. And then after, if that's voted on and approved, then the task of the investment committee then will be to create new investment guidelines and invest midterm and long term. Is there any discussion on the motion for 50 million in the 2025 funding cycle.
Right.
Please.
For context, because I think we have some new members here.
Turn on your mic.
Sorry, that haven't been around, I'm not sure, for this whole thing. So 50 million was about what we did in the first round. And so you saw on the list of priorities, trying to get this money down to the regions as quickly as we can with some continuity. And so the idea here, I think, is to say it was about around 50 million last time, 50 million this time. We all kind of can wrap our minds around that. We know what that means to our local communities. I don't know about the timing of it. I'd be interested in asking that question. What is the anticipated timing then for the next round? Because I think that will be really important. But I think we need to get another round out. I think all of our communities are like, when's the next round? But then get the runs, as you say, for the long-term investment strategy to understand what we can do in the future to provide as much predictability as we can through what time frame, right? And that's going to be the $1 million question. But that's why I'm supporting the motion, because I think it provides right now what our districts or our regions have been asking for without doing too much to the overall pot of money to allow for investment then in the future.
Thank you, Denise. Go ahead.
Is the assumption that all $50 million will go to the regions based on their allocated percentage according to the MOU?
Yeah, we are required to apply that percentage on all regional allocations.
And all this 50 million will be strictly region and no statewide initiative, correct?
This is just the regional allocation, and for us to also remember any of the funds not spent in prior allocation on a region by region basis also are available to that region.
You have 3 questions.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Was it-
Yeah, someone
Is
wants-
that Lee? Is that Jonathan Lee? Then we'll go to you, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say a couple of things. One, we pushed out $50 million, but not all of it has gone out the door. We also, I don't think have a good sense yet of how much of that money is going to be found to be effective versus less effective. And it also presupposes money. It just feels like we're pushing money out the door before we really know what the drawdown should be in order to now hit this term endowment. And so I think we need a little bit more time to, if you will, run the numbers to see what that, a 25, 30, 35 year time horizon would be, to then be able to inform the amount that we have available to push out. So I would encourage us to give us the time to run those numbers, to understand what that level is, and also for the staff to be able to evaluate the grants that already went out the door to see how many of them are actually saving lives. Because I think there's a lot of money that went out that might be questionable. And so, well, maybe not a lot, but I imagine that there's some that we might not want to refund. And so just consistency for the sake of consistency, I think is premature.
Thank you. And I will remind, we have the regional reviews, we have the expert panel reviews, and we have our grants committee reviews. So I really hope those reviews have filtered through the better applicants. David Mattia, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Director Driehaus. We have to know when this is going to be given out. If we're talking about giving out $50 million this year, I think that's too much, and it's inconsistent with what we're talking about in terms of extending the life of our grant cycle. I think option 3, we need to see the numbers first and investment modeling before we can make a decision on distributing any more money really at this point. So, my first choice, currently I'm against $50 million, and my first choice would be option 3, and then option 2 would be my second choice.
Well, Let me just go back. We did have the Key Bank presentation. It would have been in the fall of 23, was it? The fall of 23, where that number of 52 million for overhead and regional grants was the number that came out. So this 50 actually represents the grant portion, and our operating budget is still was around 2 million, Evan, for the operations. So that's still on mark with the 52 million that Key Bank proposed in 2 years ago. But thank you. Again, any other discussion? Oh, Dr. Michael Rosen.
Yes, can you tell me what we expect to get in this year in financing? In other words, there is a schedule, and I realize it may not, that we're chasing after two recreant, if you will, contributions that haven't come in, but do we know what is expected this year so that the income and outcome, in other words, in David Mataya's statements, part of it requires us to have a balance and some left over if we're going to do the term that is number 2. And so do we know what we're getting in?
So, just a couple quick items on that. There's about, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's about 38 million of distributor funds that, are pretty much guaranteed to come in. And then another 20 million projected, but not necessarily guaranteed to come in over the remainder of the year. There's also interest earned. So, if you look at the financials last month, there's about 770,000 of interest, 3 million year to date. So there are, so there is some predictability of that funding, Dr. Rosen. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, so in other words, what you think we're guaranteed is around 41 million, actually is around 45 million when you include the interest income and the distributor funds that are pretty much guaranteed.
Somewhere between 45 and 50 million, right? Depending on that, and then an additional potential 20 from other sources, depending on how their payment schedules go, because some have flexibility in their payment schedules.
And how much is in arrears of the distributor funds so far that were committed but not given?
I believe we have 2 payers that are outstanding from last year. Is the number, Jim, 16 million? Is that about right for the 2? About 11 million outstanding from those, and we did have an accelerated payment, last year as well that dramatically changed, what one of the funders would have had to do. So that's part of the risk assessment that needs to happen here.
Yeah.
Dwayne, is your hand up?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One, I just want to say, and I can't speak for all the regions, but some of the regions are very fragile at this point because they expect the dollars to come out. People are dying, and for the dollars not to be given out in a timely fashion, I think is an issue. But I do realize that when we gave out money last year, some of them got 1 and 2 and 3 year cycle grants. So the less money could be given out this year, and we could explain that because they were multi-year grants. But I think we need to put money out in the community. It's expected, and I think if we didn't, it would be sending the wrong message to the regions, and I don't think it'll end well. But what timeline were we looking at to open up the grants?
We hadn't discussed that yet, but we're looking by the end of the year, November, December.
Okay.
I know have some modifications to our grant program that Tom had reported on. By the way, Larry Kidd, I want to get to you next if I can here, Director.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, Director Kidd.
Thanks, Chair. So I have poor audio, so I apologize if you had mentioned this, but we're going to vote on the $50 million before we vote on which options to consider, which was through the strategic meeting, or are we voting on the options first and then voting on the 50 million?
Well, the last meeting, there was overwhelming consensus on option 2.
Right. But we didn't vote on it. It was just, it wasn't even a meeting. It was more of a strategic. Should we vote on that to officially approve option 2? Because we didn't take a vote. We we know where we stand, but we didn't take a vote.
All right, I just was conferring with the vice chair and that's doable, Larry.
If that's the case, then I'd make a motion to approve option 2 that we developed in the strategic meeting.
There's a motion to endorse option 2.
I would second that, Jim White.
Mr.
Jim
Chair,
White seconds that.
but we have a motion on the floor.
Well, I just asked Julie right before if she was okay with that.
Okay.
So you was just.
I'm okay with this motion and then my motion still being standing.
Okay.
So just as a point of order, we will address the motion made to endorse option 2, and then after that vote, if it carries, we'll then address the $50 million in the 2025 grant cycle. So I'd like to call the question then on the endorsement of option 2. I can do a voice vote, and if
We don't, what's the term of option 2? We haven't even set that yet. We can't vote on this.
well, it said 25 to 30 years, I think is what you can go to the next slide.
Well, that's a big difference too. I mean, come on, guys, let's be strategic here.
Could we combine the two motions to allocate a regional grant allocation and then allocate the rest of the funds to the investment/finance committee to come up with options for the term endowment? Do both, accomplish both in a motion? We'll have to agree on the number.
The alternative would be to make the motion more general so that because I recognize that there are numbers on the chart, but the option 2 was the option to continue to get as much money down to the regions as possible, recognizing that we're going to reserve some for investment and overhead, right? That's option 2. It's not spend it all right now, not hold it all right now. It's a combination of both. So that's option 2. So the detail that you provided, what's the motion? Is it to provide for that very general language related to option 2, or is it to accept everything in this chart?
No, it's
And
to
so I would
pursue
suggest
option 2, understanding what that these, right, we're trying to be clear by saying what it means when you say you're giving us this direction. We will come back with specific answers with the modeling. So,
right. So Larry, to your point, I don't know that it's your motion, but maybe the motion would be more generalized in suggesting this. The consensus of the last meeting was clearly do both, right? Balance these two things. And so maybe the motion could be more generalized to get to what you need without the detail in the chart.
I would be fine with that. Yes.
Yeah, this is Jim. I would be fine with that as well. However, I think that $50 million number, if we're going to combine these motions to vote for the next grant cycle and then to vote on, number 2 in terms of the term endowment, I think that $50 million number is too much, in my opinion, just based upon, and this has nothing to do with the investment. It has everything to do with the fact that, I get feedback from people saying that, we're pushing money out. We don't really have any feedback in terms of what kind of return on investment we're getting and what kind of progress we're making with these grantees. They're overwhelmed right now. Our staff is overwhelmed with the first grant cycle. So I just think the $50 million number is too much. I'd be more comfortable setting that number at $30 million, but 50 million just seems too much to me.
I'd like to call upon Keith O'Huddle.
Mr. Chair, just a question. Do we have a sense of, in that grant cycle we did last year, how many of those were specifically one-year grants? And again, with all whatever, you guys, your plates are full as staff. If we're going to hear about that in the personnel committee, to even consider anything other than a year, right this very second, given also the interesting funding time we're in as well. So I just wonder if that number becomes a number that's somewhat closer to the 1 year of the grant instead of a 3-year or a 2-year proposal. And that may allow us to reduce that amount to $35,000 or $35 million.
So the numbers for the grants, 1 year was 12 million, 2 years was 16 million, 3 years was 16 million.
And then I think what about 4 million was unallocated? Does that sound
For the
about right?
reserves.
About
So
six.
Could you give us those numbers again?
I'm looking at Laura, our grants manager, to try to do this quickly, but Evan, if you wanted to repeat.
Yeah,
you had-
it's in our minutes, 12-year month grants, which was 28% of the money, 12.5 million, 24-month grants, 16.8 million, 36-month grants, 16 million.
And then what went unspent for the first round of the 51 million? We only spent 45 million, 6 million in difference.
Ted?
Yeah, so I guess my impression of the amount that we put out, which was 51, or we tried, right? Was an accumulation of 2 years because it took us so long to get there. I think there was some discussion, at least we were having it at the regions, and I thought I had it here, where we were thinking that our next round may be less because we didn't have a full 2 years. If we were going to be going on a 1-year cycle, which nobody was stamping that idea. We weren't sure. We were putting out this amount. Also, when I went and stood at number 2 last month, I wasn't expecting us to then turn around and say 50 million this year. This year, it's like end of this year, which means that we're going to be announcing opening portals. Our staff, we've got a lot of we got to build the structure behind a lot of this. It's what I'm still feeling. We've got one out there, and I don't know how that's going, and we've got another one coming. I do live in and work in this space, and I do feel that if we message this correctly and we feel good about it, whatever the consensus is, I'm going to support that as best I can. But I think when I stood at number 2, I wasn't expecting 50 to come off the front load of this because it's really going to have an impact on our term that we mostly, at least in that room, agreed to. And I want to be effective and impactful for, the 5 to 10 year run, the 2 to 10 year run. And I understand the urgency right now, but I really think we could do a lot more with this. And I'm going to just leave it at that.
Go ahead, Joy.
Ted, I just like to chime in onto your impactful, because the dollar amount does determine in a lot of ways whether we are impactful. I come from a 9-county region that got $1.6 million in the last round. We only allocated about 1.3 based on some grants that just didn't make it through the process. But if I'm going to make some impact, there has to be some real dollars behind it. And if you cut that in half, now I'm looking at $800,000 for 9 counties. One of the grants was $250,000. Okay, now what? I have 3 projects that get funded. So I'm really concerned that the grant dollars have to be sufficient to make the impact. We want to make an impact. And so that's been a lot of our discussion. But let's make sure that what we do send out is impactful.
And I have Jeanette Wisbicki hand up.
Yeah, I would just like to, remind folks that we received $500 million in requests. And to me, that's indicative of the urgent need. We also have, with some changes in the federal administration, the dollars that may be available to these organizations that are helping save lives may be reduced. And I think it's very urgent that we get this money out to the communities. I think as our chair has mentioned, we do have a very good vetting process. Our expert panel spent countless hours. I mean, the dedication of those folks is just amazing to me, to make sure that the projects that are being advanced, do have a documented return. And I think we can do another grant cycle while at the same time we're evaluating the outcomes of the existing grants. I just think there is a sense of urgency to get these funds out. I know several of the regions, Region 11, is struggling. And if we can't show, that we're making good use of these dollars, we may lose the interest of the regions. And I know I'm an engineer by education, so numbers are very important. But I think in this case, we can do two things simultaneously. We can get the dollars out while at the same time evaluating different options for the best term endowment. And if staffing is an issue, why can't we hire more staff? Thank you.
And Tom, I know you had your hand up. Could you also brief everybody on some of the discussions you've had regarding revision of the grant process?
I'm going to do that and ask the staff to help me do it, but I'd like to comment first. I think this meeting should end and the world should know when the next round is coming. I think it is important that people know that. I am concerned that I never voted on $50 million and I take my vote seriously. And I guess I wish I understood better the implications of 35, 50, all of that. I don't know how long it takes to learn that. And convince us of that. But I do think that setting a date could possibly be independent of that and come quickly behind. With respect to the, and who's going to jump in here with me? Alicia, you're going to do that or Laura?
I got lost on what the question was. I'm
Well,
sorry. I'm
We'll jump
It'll
in.
make
I'll jump
sense in a
in.
minute because you'll fill in all my blanks and correct all my errors. So just watch this and fix it. So we've done a lot of kind of debriefing about the experience and you're going to see some proposals, I think, for new staff. The software program that many of us participated in selecting has been disappointing, and they've had to create a parallel system to do a lot of the work. So we're looking at adding in a new system. I think we're settling on a vendor. So there is continued work in that regard. There's a lot of work going to get ready as well. There's a solid evaluation program happening, to the judge's point. And what else would you like to, just so people know what we're doing to get ready and also what the lift is. I'll say one more thing. We have looked at a redesign. How many proposals? 1,000?
Yeah, we received 1,400 requests,
Okay.
over 1,400 requests for funding in 2024.
And they were big ass proposals. I mean, a lot to read. And so we are looking at redesigning the process with a letter of intent that will make it easier for everybody at each level. The regions, and Sarah could weigh in on that, many regions were just overwhelmed by this and have kind of signaled, can't do it again this way. So if you'll repair what I just said, and hopefully that addresses it.
Well, I think you nailed it, but we have had time to get feedback from our regions who did, big heavy lift on reviewing, and also from our expert panel. And we've really heard from those groups suggestions for improvement and how we can make their lives easier. Those are all volunteers, so we want to do everything we can to make the process better for them, but that will take a little time to make changes to, for example, the application questions. As Dr. Gregoire mentioned, we're going to bring in a letter of intent process, which we think will improve things greatly. But just making changes takes time. And also you have to remember we need to train all of our regional volunteers on that grant review process, which also takes time. And we'll be working with the regions on helping them identify stronger funding priorities so that they really get the applications that they want to see. And that process will also take a little bit of time.
And I'll just say, I think just to echo the process, and I appreciate you all talking through the staff, these decisions will have staffing impacts. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about how we make what we have manageable. When we add more to that, we will need more. And I just want to put a shout out to the staff who have been working hours and hours to make this all possible. There's 7 people. I think what we will do is support whatever decision that you all decide.
Scotty.
Thank you, Chair. So as the former president of Region 9, we had 8 counties and $2.7 million to give out. we're talking 50 mil. It sounds like a big number in this room. When you start breaking it down to 19 regions and then figuring out how that then gets divided, it's not a lot. That's the reality. My concern is, and I do think the number probably is 50 today, but for option 2 to even make sense, this board needs to figure out what does that funding look like year after year, because if you take the 50 out based on what we have right now, that leaves about 9 million in interest. If we're considering a 5% return, maybe we have $2 million in operating. So now we're down to a $7 million return year after year for interest, not counting anything new coming in. So what's the real number that we're going to allocate every year to get to 25 years? And until we can wrap our heads around that, I think it's very difficult to even land on option 2. I understand the reality of trying to stretch it longer, but the reality is also that that money doesn't go as far in 25 years that it goes today. Operation cost will go up. It's the nature of business. The cost of funding projects will go up. That's the nature of business. Will it keep up with a 5% return? I doubt it. So the question is, how do we keep our regions involved and engaged right now? Our region's made up of, like I said, 8 counties, 3 members from each county, some of them driving 2+ hours to get to a meeting to figure out how to separate $2.7 million in a meaningful way where you're not stepping on each other. Some regions are blessed. You're dealing with 1 county. Consider yourself blessed. In places that have 9 counties, it's a different balancing act to make sure everybody gets something. So what I would like to see is, 1, some grant funding today in a time frame to keep these boards engaged. That's why these folks are volunteering to be on these boards. That's why I volunteered to be on the board. I come from Scioto County, arguably the hardest hit county in the state. We've had articles written about us. We're in the New York Times. We've had books written about us. We're all over the news. So I understand and appreciate the value of extending the mission. But if we can prevent something today, the mission shouldn't last as long. If we're able to prevent people from, and prevention's #1 up there on the list, then hopefully we never get to treatment and recovery. Yeah, those things are important too, but how do we impact the population right now? Our region pretty much gave the bulk of our money into prevention because that's the generation. We have to stop it somewhere. So I'm definitely in favor of 50 million. It sounds like we have another 50 potentially coming in. But then with option 2, what is the true number we want to give out every year that makes it make sense once it gets down into the regions? I saw one region had less than $1 million that they get to consider. Region 16, I don't know how many counties that's made up of, but all of a sudden it gets diluted really quick. And how impactful are you truly? So thank you, Chair.
And I just want to highlight maybe something you just said. If we do set the precedent at $50 million for every grant round, we can't do that for 15 years. We can't do that for 10. Everyone hopefully understands the amount of money decreases every single year. So I am a bit concerned about setting the precedent that our regions believe it's going to be $50 million every year, because we can't do that. I think we can only do that for about 5 years.
Let me say, I still have 3 hands up. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I hate to put David on the spot. David, are you there?
Nope.
But you know, there has been some work done behind the scenes from the investment committee and particularly with David's team on figuring out what that magic number is, right? That would balance you know, what an appropriate spending level would be to get us to that 25 to 30 year term. And David, do you want to just talk maybe a little bit about where we think that number would be? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but some of that work has been done, right? And we can answer.
Before Dave answers, if anybody's hand is still up by accident, could you lower it? Because I'll call on you, but I just want to make sure I'm not, if your hand is up, I'll call on you. Go ahead, David.
Couple things. So the number is really variable, right? Based on, because you saw on the slide earlier that, right, 25 is very different than 35 or 40, right? It may change, right? Really could change a lot. And so I was trying to be very careful about not, because as you can see, the $50 million number creates an anchoring effect, right? You're all talking about it in relation to the last round, meaning you've all anchored to the idea that the last round was 50, and ergo, you're now anchored to this number. And so the idea of not putting the numbers on the page was to make sure we don't get anchored to a number yet, but rather to say a philosophy, right? What are we trying to achieve in total? So Jim, I think there's some back and forth on this, and that then I kind of want to balance this with Evan's comment to say, and no matter how you slice and dice this, it won't be 50 million every year for the next 10 years. Like that, we don't see that happening. And the reminder to go back to the beginning of the presentation that these are all the could be's. We even have to do some modeling out about what if we don't get the 20, some of the money that's slated to come in. On the other side, we could say, what would happen if we got more? And so I think that we've got these pieces, and then zoom back even further to remind ourselves that the pursuit of this model should also have a multiplier effect, not just on the investments, but on the ability to attract funds and help in even other ways. So I think we're still thinking, so I think, and Jim, I am shirking the question, so hold on.
You are shirking this question, right? You are.
I am, but I'm acknowledging that. So, I'm going to say, in this room that I want to be careful not to now anchor on my numbers, but that it's not 50 million and it's not 25 million. It's somewhere in that middle range per year that will be available for funding of all things, right? Of all things, meaning, right, the operations statewide and regional granting. Because again, I just want to keep coming back to the full picture, right? Regardless of the answer today, to make sure that we're thinking of it the whole. And so depending on the answer, 25 years, 35 years, when the money comes in, if the money comes in, we're talking about somewhere between 25 and $50 million a year available, depending on how we structure it and the returns and the timelines and the risk willingness of this group to change investment policies. Like all of these layer up to a set of decisions if we have the direction to go forward. So Jim, it's a very wide range I'm giving, but I'm calling it 25 to 50, depending on the answers that come back from the modeling. So my point is it's in range is another way to say this. So
no, I hear you, but would you agree that the $50 million, okay, if we were to kick out $50 million, that really kind of flies in the face a little bit of what most people agreed to, which was to set some sort of term of 25 to 30 years. I mean, that would impact that considerably. Would you agree to that?
Jim, so we actually are discussing option 2. We're not discussing the dollar amount just yet. We're discussing to vote on the term, and then once we vote on that, then we can vote on whether we want it to be 50 or a different number.
And I think this has gotten a little bit mixed, right, in that way. So if we stay focused on just the concept of the term, I'm hoping that this clarifies the concept of the term, right? That just gives the basis, because then this vote will, I think you've heard a lot about the implication, and the reason that we've sequenced it this way is because if you give direction, then you have a focus on the discussion that you need to have about the amount.
Let me go to David Mattia. I have us next.
Okay, thanks. I was a finance major at Miami University. That was a long time ago. And the only thing I remember from finance was the rule of 72, which is a nice little formula to tell you how fast your money's going to double given a rate of return. So if you're earning 9%, your money is going to double in 8 years. 8 times 9 equals 72. Now, if we go back to this, this slide is up. Investment performance, likely 4.5% to 5%, depending on portfolio construction. That's actually a pretty low rate of return for what we want to do. But the next column says funds invested today will grow 3 to 6 times over 25 to 30 years. It will take 14.5 years at 5% for our money to double. So I'm concerned about the accuracy of that. And again, my second point is, while I support a some kind of extension of our giving life. You know, we can't have it both ways. We can't give away 50 million up front and then expect to fund this give in the future. And I'm certainly sympathetic to, you know, Jeanette's comments that, you know, the regions need the money now, but you know, we can't have it both ways. We either have to decide whether we're going to give the regions the money now or whether we want to be operating on a 25 to 35 year period. I would like to ask the two people who made the motions to withdraw the motions, and maybe we can consider a new motion.
Well, right now, the motion is for endorsement of the number two term endowment. So you're wanting that withdrawn?
No, well, here's my problem with that second thing is the number, like David can explain, 4.5% to 5% proposed rate of return investment performance does not give you 3 to 6 times the pot of money you have in 25 to 30 years.
So really quickly, Dave, happy to address this later, but it incorporates modeling that includes MOU funding coming in the future along with granting rounds. So there's more to it. And it includes a principal increase as well as the rate of return. Promise we've done the modeling.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Greg.
I'm not even sure which motion this is relevant to, but after hearing what everyone's talking about, I keep coming back to the fact that we all approved a $3 million budget for administration. And all of us have worked in grants where there's anywhere from a 10 to 15% fee for administrative costs. So why don't we look at what the staff can do now, what they would need to do in order to ramp up, and look at that number, because I feel like, to your point, that falls someplace in between 25 and 50 million. Because what we can't do is continue to approve a $3 to $4 million administrative budget and not put out any money. That to me is not acceptable. That's just justifying our existence and coming down here once a month and talking about things. So, you know, I understand the judge's point as well. We can't have it both ways. Everybody wants to have it both ways, but we don't have enough money for that. But I certainly hear, you know, I have one county, so I don't know that I call it blessed because the scale of our problems per capita is significant. I also recognize that we are blessed in some ways in Summit County with different revenue streams to address these problems. But I also echo Janet's concern that, you know, Medicaid rollbacks are looming and the problems are going to exacerbate. So I would suggest that I'm not asking anybody to recall their motions, but perhaps we ask the staff and we ask Alicia, like, what does it look like for us if we put out 25 million? How many people do you need? What is the administrative cost going to be? Because I'm not interested in approving another administrative budget where we aren't putting out anything. But I think that's maybe we look at the number in reverse.
So again, I really appreciate you bringing up the federal and perhaps state cuts, because that was discussed at the planning meeting. So again, I'd like to really focus on just the vote on the term endowment. And then if that carries, we can actually talk about whether it's 50 million or a different number. But so I noticed, Larry, Larry, your hand's up. Is this on the term endowment?
Yeah, if we could go back to the 3 different slides. Yeah, there. While I made the proposal for option 2, I do recognize, and the vast majority of the room last month were sitting in option 2, with the exception of 2, which was option 3, even more conservative. So clearly that's where the board wants to be. But I understand the balance, living through this over the last several years, of getting money to the regions and allowing the regions to, can you go back, please?
Yeah.
The importance of the regions getting money out. Can we go back to the original slide, please?
Which slide? Okay.
Here we go. So what if we were on just this year, this would be 2 years in a row, offer 45 million in this round in this fiscal year, and announce that we're going to go with option 2 moving forward. So the regions will have 2 years of larger amounts of money and investment into the regions, but we do show the long-term investment strategy and whatever that 25 to 30 million, I don't know. You know, I hope David's right about a better return than 5% because I think we can do much better with that. And I believe you, David. I hope you're right, which will allow us for not only long-term sustainability, but much larger statewide projects that we haven't even discussed or even seen yet. So again, my proposal, this isn't a motion, it's just open for discussion. I want to keep my original proposal, is put in 45 million for this year with the, right behind that motion, option 2 moving forward after this year.
Well, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to have a vote on option 2. And then if that carries, then we can have a vote on the dollar amount for the next round. So I don't see any more hands up. So okay,
I
go
do
ahead.
have some comments, but if you want to move forward with this, it's more relative to what's going on related to the amount. So I will hold my comments. But we don't, do we have language for the motion? Larry, we had talked about more generalized language. Do we have a motion with language in front of us right now? Can you just provide us with some language for the motion?
Sure. Can we go back to the slide 1?
This one, Larry, this was the one, the slide that we had prompted the motion, I think.
I think it was the other one, but that's fine. I make a proposal to approve option 2, subsequent to the meeting that we had last month on the strategic meeting of moving forward in terms of term endowment.
So again, the vote I'm going to call question will be on endorsing the term endowment. And if that carries, then we can talk about the dollar amount and what year that will be.
Correct.
And with that being the case, Lori, stand by for a roll call if needed, but I'll just do it right now by voice vote. All those in favor of option 2, term and
we need a second.
we already have the motion second. So again, it is just on endorsing the term endowment, which is option 2. Then if that carries, we can vote on whether it's 50 million or a different number. All in favor of term endowment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay. Nay. We were promised numbers before we would vote on this, and we haven't received them.
I don't know that anybody promised numbers. Now we're going to, so I have the motion carrying. So now we'll go to the motion is the 50 million that Julie made the motion and Jeanette and Denise seconded. But again, so what's on the floor for discussion now is whether it's 50 million or a lower or a different number. Go ahead, Denise.
So, yeah, so I am Region 2. I'm blessed. And I've always recognized that Region 2 is blessed because we have one region. Although we do have 49 municipalities in the city of Cincinnati in that region, so it does get a little complicated. But I just want to, from the perspective of a larger region, we had requests for $50 million in our region, right? And so we got a fraction of that funded, obviously, because we got our share. But I do want to make sure that I want to level set just a little. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't represent our interests. And so we've got these projects that involve recovery, housing, and peer support, and support for pregnant women who are issues with it. And we've got all these programs that we are trying to fund. We are worried, as Jeanette said, about state and federal cuts to some of these programs. And so these dollars then become even more important. I mean, it's added importance to the foundation dollars that we're getting. But I recognize that some of the other regions aren't in that situation, right? There's capacity issues and there's infrastructure issues. So, but I want to ask a question. I think I know the answer to it, but I want to make sure. If we were to allocate 50 million this year, and I am not suggesting that the 50 runs for the next 10 years. No one has suggested that. That is not reasonable, and I recognize that. That the dollar, as we go, depending on what we get in, that number is going to change. Understood. We also have talked about other sources of funding, right? Through the marijuana tax and others, creative solutions, right? So there's a chance that we get more money through different revenue sources other than the distributor. So I just want to throw that out there because this number ebbs and flows. It could be less, it could be more. We don't know. And I'm anxious also to see the runs over the next 10, 20 years to see what that really looks like. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this distribution now that people can use on the ground. I do not want to spend another year discussing the amounts long-term. And, you know, we have built capacity amongst staff and I appreciate that. But so I feel like we are ready to go with another round where we to allocate these dollars. And I'll just say Region 2 is ready to go. We're ready to go. We could use those dollars today and save lives in my community. There's absolutely no question in my mind. And that's why I'm always like, let's go. So I just want to offer that perspective from Region 2. But the question is, if a region were to not have the capacity to use another round of dollars right now, wouldn't those dollars remain with that region so that when they do have the capacity or they want to add dollars one round to the next round, they would have the opportunity to do that when they're ready to do it, recognizing that some are not in a position to do it right away, but some of us are. And so that's, for me, kind of the tug and pull. But I think the answer is yes, that money would reside with the region.
The answer is yes, and I want to just insert a couple of things to consider as you kind of think through how you want to do this. There are implications to operations and communications and the applicant experience. Most importantly, the applicant experience when you start to break off and do different starting points with regions. And I think that what we have built within this is a regional structure. How community organizations work, they do not recognize county lines, they recognize service areas, and they want to have a streamlined process and experience. And so what we are trying to balance is the applicant and the community organization experience alongside a process that makes sense of a very important, set of money that was entrusted to us. And so I want to just say that, yes, that is true, but that will come at a cost. There are, I think, even organizations that operate in multiple regions who really struggle to do the reporting process are struggling to do the reporting process that we're laying out. And I want to also point out, so that's the answer to the first question. I did want to just say, and you all have started the compliance machine. And so we still have work to do to manage and support 245 projects within the 7 staff. And so if you don't allocate money, I'm not saying one way or the other, we're going to support whatever you want to do. Even if you don't allocate money today, the money that is used for operations will be to support those grantees that exist. So 202 organizations across the state that exist today. And so there's a lot that comes with any decision that you make today. And we will do our best. What you'll hear is that we have personnel decisions that we put before the personnel committee to just manage what we have. Whatever the decision is today, we'll be coming back with a need for more, and we can give more color to what that looks like. So I know there was a lot discussed, so I just wanted to throw that color.
Can I dig in?
I got Jeanette Wisbicki with her hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I agreed 100% with the commissioner. When I second the motion with the commissioner on the 50 million, it is just for this year. And again, I think we can tell folks, we recognize the urgency and the needs of the region. This is going to be the second and only time that we're going to be able to offer 50 million. And we can explain that we're looking at a longer term endowment. But we still want to be as helpful to the regions as possible. So I think, we can sell that. I know in my region, and since I'm representing Region 11, I've got to represent them well. There were a couple grants that had asked for multi-year, And because it's a first-time program, our region only voted for 1 year. I would like to be able, I think the goal is to continue those programs if they're successful. And again, I'm of the opinion that if we expand, and I realize our staff has done a tremendous job, and my hat's off to them. They have worked absolutely tirelessly to make this happen for our regions. If we need to hire more staff, let's do it. I mean, it's our operating cost compared to what we're getting out to the regions is fairly low, I think. So I think just because the need is there, if we're in the 40 to 50 million for this range, for this current cycle or next cycle, I think that would send a region to the message, or a message to the regions that we care about you, that we recognize the urgency, and we're also looking to the future by creating this term endowment. So subsequent rounds will be less, and we will know, hopefully by the time the next grant cycle opens, we'll know what subsequent years will be able to offer the amount. And that way the regions can rely on that amount.
I just wanted to dig in a little bit on the commissioner's question. We allocated $51 million last round, only awarded $45 million. So that's $6 million stays with the region and will be available at this grant round for that region. Okay, and that would be the case if we don't do the additional whatever we allocate this time around.
Yeah, we have 16 regions who did not spend all that they were allocated.
Got it. Thanks.
Go ahead, Tom.
So, and again, we have 7 counties, not one, but if you do the math.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, we got Tom on the floor.
So if you do the math, we with our $2.3 million, that's about $5 a person in our region. If you look at the statistics in 23 and 22, we've seen a reduction of 2% and then up to 9%. And I imagine in 24, we'll see an additional reduction. We are having a dramatic impact. We're also using, in addition to the state monies, we've been able to use our local monies to have a big impact. The difference between Hamilton County and Morrow County is I can have a dramatic impact in a really quick fashion. And so the $50 million, if you look at when we started, we had $500 million in requests. I think the need is now, and I think that obviously it'd be great to continue have that money down. We can look for additional monies. I had a grandson born this morning.
Congratulations.
So, I think about that, and I think that the need is now, and I don't want to wait 18 years for him to have to figure out that we have a problem. So I think the $50 million is not out of line, and yet we have to address the problem now. Thank you.
Michael Rosen.
Would the commissioner accept a modification to make it someplace between 25 and 50? And since that was what was said to be able to do proposal 2, and meaning 37.5 to 40 or $40 million as a modification to her proposal.
I'm not going down as far as 25, just not doing it.
I said 40.
You said 25 to 50. So what's your number?
What the finance person said is it's someplace between 25 and 50, and I was making a in the middle proposal.
I'd like to also note the finance person said not to anchor to his numbers.
I have a strong belief
that's why
we
it's 40
spend
and
our
not
money.
30 and not 37.5.
I have a strong belief that if we spend our money appropriately into the regions, that we will get support from others outside that will help fund us in the future. And so that a lot of this discussion that we're having right now won't be as critical. But unless you show people that you're putting money out there and you're getting results, we're just spinning our wheels here. And I really think it's important that we spend money now. And whether we do that next year and the following year and the year after that, that's a different story. But today I want to spend money now. And I'm not pulling back my motion.
And I will say that the meeting last week or last month, pardon me, and I'll come back to you, Michael, unless your hand's still up. Two things were discussed. One is money spent earlier can lead to match money. And the second thing that was discussed was there's a concern of cut of federal programs, and some of those organizations would be looking to other sources being like One Ohio to fill that gap. The third thing that had been discussed is we did do a training program. When was that? August of last year, Sarah, to train people whose grants were not approved.
In January.
In January. So there was a thought that some of the 1,200 or so that had been denied might want to come back because they went through the staff training on grant writing. So those are some of the factors that have been discussed.
Echo the question.
There's a call to the question. I see it all nodding. Lori, I think we're going to have you do a roll call. So the motion is, and we don't have a date on it, but the next grant cycle would be for 50 million to be for regional grants. And then at some point we can have the staff work with us on when the next grant cycle will be. Lori, would you go ahead and call the question then?
Director Claymeyer.
Aye.
Director Rob Blaisdell.
Aye.
Director Gregoire.
No.
Director Kidd.
Nay.
Director Lee.
Nay.
Director White. Director Radcliffe.
No.
Director Royson. Director Royson.
No.
Director Dodge.
A weak yes.
Director Dreehouse.
Yes.
Director Hohaddle.
Yes.
Director Mattia.
No.
Director Piccirilli.
Yes.
Director Greta Johnson. Director Silac.
Yes.
Director Bruce.
Yes.
Director Amen.
Yes.
Director Whiston.
Yes.
Director Handrew.
Yes.
Director Ayers.
No.
Director Mason.
Yes.
Director Powell.
Yes.
Director St. John.
No.
Director Wertzbicki.
Yes.
Pardon me. So even though the vote was 15-8, we have to have, what do we have? I'm counting directors' classes.
So we have a no from one of the director's classes.
So the statewide directors' classes did not, all voted nay, so therefore the vote did not carry. If I understand, Andy, is that your understanding? For those who might not be aware, so the MOU set some parameters so that one class would not dominate another class. And so literally, is it we have to have an I vote in each or a majority of each?
Just at least one.
We would add, okay.
Have to have at least one.
So that motion fails. What I'd like to do then at the next meeting is put it on the agenda, but move on with committee reports. But you know what? This has been,
Can we make a
Can we
new
put a 40
motion?
Can we put a 40 million or a 35 million or something like that in between as a motion?
Michael, if you want to make the motion for 40 million,
I do.
and is there a second to the 40?
I think we need a time period.
Well, there's
I'll
a
second.
motion.
I'll second.
So there's a motion by Michael and a second by Jeanette for 40 million to be in the next grant cycle. So
Can I this is Larry. I have a question. What are we doing moving forward? Are we just working with this year, or will this be option? revert
Just
back
this
option
year.
two? Okay.
Well, actually, the term is next grant cycle, and we'll see if it's going to be November, December, or January, but it'll be, sooner than later is all I can say.
But we talked about clarity for the regions moving forward, whatever that number is. Are we going to move to option two where they initiate 25 to 30 million in future grants after this, we approve or not approve this grant?
So the boards approve option two. It would take a different vote to change that. But for investment's sake, you've got to stick with one strategy.
Mr.
Right.
Chairman, we're talking about
Yeah.
two different option twos.
Pardon?
I think we're talking about two different option twos. I think Director Kidd is talking about the ongoing grant cycle number, and you're talking about option two, the term endowment, which I don't think anyone's talking about at the moment.
Basically,
it-
That is correct, Evan. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so the motion was made by Michael Roizen and second by Jeanette Wisbisky for 40 million being in the next grant cycle. So, go ahead, Lori. I'll
Can
call
I,
the
can
question.
can we have some discussion?
I'm sorry, Denise.
Yeah, so I'm sitting here wondering what our options are right now, because at this moment in time, we have no money going out again. The motion is to do 40 instead of 50. Was it that the statewide appointees, we didn't have a person from that? Okay, how many statewide appointees are on call? Do we have a few? Just wondering.
But one.
Okay, all right, so.
We have
We have all.
Okay, all right, so the idea here is to go lower than 50. I understand. It is extremely frustrating to sit in this room and have all the regions, or most of the regions at least, vote yes for that, as much as we think we can get for our people, and then not have the vote succeed. So but I appreciate the other perspective about the idea of investment, and if we take the 50 out, obviously it impacts the ongoing investment, obviously. So I have a friendly amendment, because 40 has been offered, 50 has been offered. I have a friendly amendment that we do 45. Just, and I don't know if the author of the motion will accept the friendly amendment. If he doesn't, that's fine, but I feel compelled to offer it just to get us a little bit closer to the 50. So I'm offering a friendly amendment to the author of the motion.
I'd like to stick with 40, as I think I think the statewide people will vote for 40, and I don't think 45. And I think I'd like to get something out to the regions.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Me?
Just a question on the grant cycle. This would be available for 1, 2, and 3 year grants, or just
Yes.
1 year grants?
And that's what it was the last grant cycle. I have every reason to believe these will continue to be feathered, so to speak.
That's the assumption I am with that vote, with my vote, but I just wanted to clarify.
So what he's really saying is of the 47 issued last cycle, I think 13 roughly was for the 1 year. So yeah, you have a feathering. Some of the money is still being invested now, earning interest. So let me do this to call the question then. So the motion is by Mr. Royce, Dr. Royce, pardon me, and Jeanette for 40 million in the next grant cycle. Lori, if you could do a roll call.
Director Claymeyer,
Aye.
Director Rob Blaisdell,
Yes.
Director Gregoire,
Yes.
Director Kidd,
Yes.
Yeah, and then I'll text it.
Director Lee,
Yes.
Director White, Director Radcliffe,
Yes.
Director Royson,
Yes.
Director Dodge,
Yes.
Director Dreehouse,
Tentative, yes.
Director Hohato,
Yes.
Director Mattia,
No.
Director Picarilli,
Yes.
Director Greta Johnson,
Yes.
Director Silac,
Yes.
Director Bruce,
Yes.
Director Amen,
Yes.
Director Whiston,
Yes.
Director Andrew,
Yes.
Director Ayers,
Yes.
Director Mason,
Yes.
Director Powell,
Yes.
Director St. John,
Yes.
Director Wurzbicki.
Yes.
So the motion for 40 million in the next grant cycle carries. Thank you very much. Again, this has been great discussion, probably something that's been a year in the making. So I'd like to move on to committee reports, and the first is Personnel Committee with Julie Amon.
Okay, so the Personnel Committee met on Tuesday, June 3rd. We continue to have light participation with our committee. I urge everyone to get involved on some committee of some sort. We discussed employee retention and workload management, which we were anticipating a vote of some sort coming soon. So that was discussed on on comparing One Ohio's workload to other foundations and how we will need to ramp up. We talked about risk management and mitigation. We discussed cost of living adjustments and retirement plan updates. And then you guys should have notes in your packet from the personnel handbook where we were discussing Section 4 employee compensation and performance and Section 5 employee conduct, working to get the personnel handbook updated in the best way so that we're taking care of our employees. That's my report.
Thank you very much. Next item is the audit and finance report. Evan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to thank Jim for all of his hard work as we continue to transition the finances of the organization as we expand our interaction with David and his company, Panoramic Strategies. So thank you for all of that. And I will turn it over, I guess, starting first with David to do the April financial report.
Absolutely. So, folks have the financials in front of them. I'm going to do the very, very quick version, just meaning everything's on track. Like that's the easy way to say it. Spending is consistent with the prior months, other than a large payment out for our grant support system for Mighty Crow, which was approved in the last budget amendment. So you'll see that $100,000. And from a cash flow, basically right in line with prior months. At the bottom, we talked about the cash balance and incoming funds earlier, so I feel like we've covered that. And then finally, the regional awards and dollars going out the door. I just think it's important to remind ourselves that there are 1, 2, and 3-year grants, which is why you see a large balance here. No surprises. Although, of course, there are some questions of, when, for a small number of grants, how to deploy those dollars as we get through the process, which we heard a little bit earlier. But really, there shouldn't, we saw no significant issues. I think maybe I'll just point out, sorry for those online. Let me just go to the other page. Just to note that unallocated interest element, we are earning about $700,000 a month right now, and that's without some of the more robust investments. I think it's just kind of a point towards future discussions, right? So Dave's point about, about the fact that we could be earning more, this is the opportunity that's in front of us. Director Claymire, anything that you wanted to add to the April financials?
No, just see if there are any questions from the board.
Okay, so we will need a motion, though, to approve the April unaudited financial reports.
This is Jonathan Lee, so moved.
Second.
So we have a motion on the floor, duly seconded, to approve the April unaudited financial reports. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Go ahead with tentative budget.
Right, so then, and you want to open with the budget amendment?
I would just there's a proposal from the Audit Finance Committee, which we approved before this meeting as a budget amendment to the 2024 budget. So I'll have David walk through that, and then if there's certainly any discussion, we'll get to that.
And I'll do the 3-minute version to keep time, but feel free to go backwards. As a reminder, the budget's set in 2 components, program and operating. The main items today will be program that we'll be requesting. It goes through the process of internal assessment to the Audit and Finance Committee where it went this morning, which was approved and brought to you today. A reminder that within any category, and I'll show you the categories in a second, that the board requires approval for changes in a category of 10% or more when it's increased, not when it's decreased. These are based on the insights, the learnings, and the knowledge that we need to increase capacity to support the regions. I think that conversation's probably been robust enough that I don't need to repeat it here. And so I'll go to the actual numbers themselves. You'll see this organized top to bottom from program budget to operating. You'll see the 2 red circles where we have specific 10% or above categories. Each line represents a category. So we do need approval for the changes in grant support system and the regional support budget. The main items came out of the personnel committee to support positions, 2 additional grant associates and a compliance person, as well as $45,000 of regional support for legal expenses that have been requested from the regions are all the main items that are in those 2 buckets, with a couple of other smaller contracts to support grant evaluation as the other item that's not as significant in those 2 buckets. If you look at the very bottom of the slide, you'll see that the total request in addition is about 100,000, 102, which is about 3.6% budget increase. But then if you look at the line above it in operations, there's actually a decrease, mostly because of timing of positions, because of the predictability of these discussions. So we're excited. I should say I know that Alicia and the team are very excited to get these positions in place to support the mission and the regions. So, is there anything from the Audit and Finance Committee that folks wanted to add to this quick overview?
I need a motion to approve the mid-year budget amendment as recommended by the Audit and Finance Committee. So Otto makes the motion, Tom seconds the motion. Discussion then is to approve the mid-year budget amendment as recommended by Audit and Finance. I'll do my voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And the motion carries. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll move on to investment committee.
Go for it.
I'll move on to investment committee now.
Mr. Chair, sorry, we're going to do the audit kickoff.
I'm sorry, Evan, what?
The audit kickoff for 2024 before we get to the investment committee.
Okay, the related party questionnaire. Oh, yes. I couldn't get by the related party questionnaire. Too many eyes.
I'm trying to not be frustrated, Tom.
Thanks for having me. I'll be very brief. We're just doing the audit kickoff. The engagement letter is signed. The request list is out. We're already starting to get things from management. We have to communicate to you. There's a 2-way communication. You will receive, if you haven't already, you have in your packet your planning letter from us. We've updated the date that we're starting field work, which is the week of June 16th. So right around the corner here, we're frantically getting information to get that pushed through our system. So the 2-way communication is that if you have any questions or concerns, that you talk with us, and you will have our contact information directly, and then we would follow up on those concerns and address them as we need to. One of the other things that you are going to have is the questionnaires for related party and fraud questions. So our responsibility is to review for fraud and to get information from you to report that if you think that there is any. Related parties is important with determining family and management. I'll just go straight to the examples. Yeah. So those examples are members of the board and management that provide services and receive funds. So that's a related party. Immediate family member. So if your family member provides services, receives funds. Employers of the board as well. So those you work for, not necessarily you involved in receiving directly. And then significant contributors and grant recipients. So because of the grant facilitation, that's going to raise that related party. And while these are allowed, we need to be transparent. So if an employer, spouse, or someone you're related to is receiving funds, will want to be reported on that communication, the questionnaire, the related party questionnaire, so that we can evaluate it and determine if it needs to be, if it raises to the elevation of being disclosed in the financial statement. So transparency is very important here. Grant recipients included in that. And then separate entities as well as immediate family members working for One Ohio and any of those relationships. So that was a really quick go through of the examples of related parties. So if you ever have a question, you can put it and then we can decide if it raises to that elevation. I would rather report than not report. So otherwise, we are going to move through our risk-based approach of the audit. And like I said, if you need anything to communicate with me, please do so.
Hi there.
You have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. For those of us that are ADIS board, alcohol and drug mental health board directors that represent our regions, the related parties allowed but be transparent has triggered that significant contributors or grant recipients. Many of our boards also fund One Ohio grant funded agencies. Does that meet the measure, or can you provide some guidance on how and if we need to disclose that?
I would say when in doubt, I would disclose. And we'll determine if that relationship raises to that elevation in accordance with accounting standards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. Next item, we have the investment committee report, Jim White.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks to all the participants of the investment committee. We've had some robust discussions. I think the conversation today with everyone gives us more clarity in terms of now kind of moving forward with respect to how we may or may not manage some of our assets going into the future. The biggest thing, real quick, over the last month or so was putting out an RFP for management of some of our short duration assets, basically our cash. We sent it out to 8 or 9 different respondents. They all responded. We've now narrowed that list down to, I think, 4 or 5 participants. Plan on scoring those RFPs and then bringing in probably 2 or 3 respondents for actual meetings here over the next 30 to 45 days. But thank you for everyone's commitment to having these conversations about the term endowment, non-term endowment. It's been very, very helpful to our committee moving forward. One final thing, and there was something in David's slide about, and a question around, investment returns. And I think David cited 4.5% to 5%. Remember that for clarity, investment returns kind of come in cycles. And I think maybe we would all agree that we've kind of been in this kind of crazy cycle over the last 15, 20 years where returns have been kind of outsized. And therefore, I think the anticipation is over the next 10 to 15 years, unfortunately, equity returns and returns in different asset classes will probably be smaller than they were over the last 15 to 20 years. Things do kind of normalize and come back. And I've looked at a lot of capital market assumptions for different asset classes, and I can tell you that nothing is much higher than about 6.5 to 7% over the next kind of 7 or 10 years. So when you actually look at taking just a balanced allocation of equity exposure and fixed income exposure in a 50-50 blend, and if you think 7% is the right number for equities and maybe 3% is the right number in fixed income, you do come to that 5 to 5.5% total return for a portfolio. So I do think that while some may think that those are very conservative numbers, I don't think they really are for the next kind of 7 to 10 years. But we will make that we'll make that play out as we move forward with kind of the next step of this process, which would be to go out and actually start a process to put together an RFP for an actual investment advisor. So that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Jim? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Grant Oversight Committee report by Tom Gregoire.
Yeah, you heard better part of my report already. For those of you who were able to join us at the Ohio Association of County Behavioral Health, whatever, OACPA. What's the A? Authority. Okay. We our staff presented and held 3 sessions on Monday that were very well received. Alicia taught a lot of people about national models and that's a talk we might get here sometime, or at least some slides. It was very helpful to hear how other states are approaching. And then we had 89, how many?
86.
86. 3 were missing, but we had 86 people who are all funded by us come to 2 different conversations about their experience. And that was really rewarding to see people get in the room, talk to each other, and speak really highly, frankly, of the staff about the process, the support they felt along the way. As somebody who's written a lot of grants over the years, I don't remember having those feelings for a funder. So a credit to you all for that. We will be opening a reporting portal July 1st, and staff funded programs will have 30 days to report on their progress to date. An evaluation team has designed all of that, and we'll hear probably early fall. I would think we'll get our first report in here on performance by the folks who are being funded. And you also heard that we're exploring a new vendor for our whole grant process, which is going to make things a whole lot easier too. Any questions?
If I can add on something real quick. We will be going to each of the 19 regions beginning mid-August through early November to deliver each of them a evaluation report on all of their grantees that were funded, and then some comparison data across the state. So we will be going to each region so that they know how their grantees are performing 6 months into their work.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom?
I'd like to share something real quick. I was a table leader at the OACPA conference. It was a small group. Apparently everybody could come earlier. I took the 3:30 to 5 session, and I had 6 grantees. Unfortunately, none of them were from my region. I was kind of excited to maybe meet some of the grantees that I didn't know. I was in the wrong area. But what I would like to say about that is somebody who has written grants, managed grants, and kind of ran grants myself, I was impressed at the level of confidence of the grantees at the table, the positive feedback that I got on their implementation process, that I had about 6 of them from different areas of the state, and they all felt very confident in their abilities to implement and to carry out the purpose for which they wrote their grant. And for me as a board member, that was extremely reassuring. As someone commented earlier, we are a multi-region 16. We have 7 different counties. And I've totaled our population is 225,000 people over a large spread out area. So capacity to serve is always a huge issue for us. So as we move forward in there, continuing to leverage and kind of do hopefully what some of the other areas are doing successfully, it really kind of boosted my confidence in what is happening on the ground level. And I'm looking forward to seeing that data.
Thank you. Okay, and wrapping up grandstand, let me just give the executive committee report. We met in April and again in May and discussed many topics. Again, one of the ones was movement to this location, and I am so appreciative to CCAO, especially me being a city guy, you county folk letting us city guys in here. I appreciate it. Also on updates, we are working on some amendments to the code of regulations. When I say we, I mean Andy. Keith. And a few others, of course. I'm just Keith. But the bottom line is, again, the original letter and guidelines weren't perfect, but nothing new like that really is. And so we really appreciate some of the detail that we're going to bring forward. So the executive committee will host a special session in coming weeks to finalize those recommendations and recommend when to make those at a future meeting. Well, we've had a lot of exciting work at our committees today. I really appreciate everything everybody's doing under new business and announcements. Are there any new business topics or announcements that need to be brought before the board? We're hearing none, then as a reminder, our next meeting will be in July then. So our next meeting will be virtual July 20. Pardon? What? Go ahead, Alicia.
We had held July 24th in case we needed further discussion. Given that you all made the vote for the term endowment model as a concept and the next grant round, I think we can hold on the July 24th meeting with the plan to bring an update on all that information at the August meeting, but it is completely up to you all. I think.
So you're saying possibly we don't need a July 24th if we handle the meeting, the stuff at the August 13th meeting?
Correct. They're about 10, 15 days apart. So, you know, it would give the staff more time to get prepared with some of the models and things that you've been talking about today.
So do we have the power not to, just to declare no July meeting?
The July meeting was added.
Okay.
So your original 2025 calendar did not have a July meeting, but just in case we added to make sure that if y'all needed more time to talk through the conversations you had today, that we put that there. So it sounds like you don't need that. And so August 13th is just a few days after. We could keep the original schedule.
So we'll go with the August 13th as being our next meeting. Would that be virtual then, or that will be virtual?
That'd be a virtual.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn then?
So moved.
By Julie, second by Tom. He moved first. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries.
Thank everybody. Thank you.